we haven't talked about Gaza in a little while because obviously peace has been restored there, right? We wish. But Jackson Hinkle tweets out a horrifying scene in Gaza right now as rains come in and threaten these what are essentially, I guess, tent settlements, shanty towns. A lot of people there, obviously, not living in their homes, which have been destroyed, but living in tents, which makes them especially vulnerable to floods during the rainy season. And of course, when the rains came and the grounds flooded, a heartbreaking catastrophe is unfolding in Gaza right now. For the third winter in a row, families are living in tents that are collapsing under heavy rain. So let's take a look.
ايش طب اطلع يا اختي
يلا رحمتك
طب اطلع برا
ايش ايش انا قلبي جرى تغرق ما خلص غرقت يا ربي يا الله انا بموت يا ربي انا بموت يلا خذني يا الله يلا خذني يلا خذني.
Obviously, very difficult to watch. Here's a little girl clinging to her grandfather, shaking from the cold as rainwater pours in from their tent. Don't forget, it does get well below room temperature at nights because deserts tend to get cool at night, obviously. So if you look up, this week I actually looked up just out of curiosity, how cold is it? It gets into the mid 50s at night, which soaking wet in cold water, just a horrible. So this is, peacetime. Heavy rain floods camps in Gaza, worsening conditions for displaced Palestinians. Rain hammered the sprawling encampments across Gaza on Saturday, turning roads into rivers, soaking freezing families inside their tents and forcing people to sweep dirty water from their shelters as it pooled around their beds and belongings. The storms arrived as cold weather set in, adding new urgency to humanitarian concerns for the Strip's 2 million residents, and as tensions flare up in Israel within Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet. The crisis has been compounded by the collapse of water and sewage systems after 2 years of Israeli strikes destroyed key infrastructure, leaving hundreds of thousands of people crowded into areas with almost no toilets, drainage, or sanitation. In Gaza, where an estimated 90% of the population has been displaced, more than 1.5 million people urgently require emergency shelter assistance, the United Nations Migration Agency, IOM, said last month. The UN said last week that Israel has rejected over 100 requests for the entry of relief materials, including blankets, winter clothes, and tools and material to maintain and operate water, sanitation, and hygiene services. So what that means is that the genocide is continuing, ceasefire or no ceasefire. Just because they're not bombing you from the air multiple times a day doesn't mean they're not actively trying to kill you. This is trying to kill a civilian population, denying them what they obviously need to live, especially during the rainy winter. Such restrictions continue to hamper humanitarian efforts, Deputy UN spokesperson Farhan Haq told journalists in New York. So here is Medea Benjamin explaining the urgency of this.
Happening to the tents in Gaza now that the rains have started. These were never meant to be homes. They're flimsy canvas thrown up after people's houses were bombed. And now that the winter rains have come, water is pouring in. Floors turn into brown rivers of sewage and trash. Children wake up in the dark screaming because icy water is rushing into their tent. Mothers hold up their babies off the flooded ground, wrapping them in wet blankets, and elderly people are trapped on soaked mattresses with nowhere dry to go. And the world is told, relax, there's a ceasefire and aid is flowing in. But that's a big lie. Israel promised at least 600 aid trucks a day under this deal, enough to at least start feeding people and get medicines into the clinics and bring clean water and more shelter. But they violate this every single day. In fact, the average has been about 170 trucks. That's a third of what was promised. And this shortfall is catastrophic. Every truck that Israel blocks is a hospital without supplies, a family without food or shelter. And what about the fire part of the ceasefire? Israeli forces are killing Palestinians every single day.
Oh, that's right. So they haven't even really ceased firing. They haven't even ceased firing. It's just in addition to that, they're not letting the basics in, like blankets or anything that would be necessary to like restore sewage systems and things like that. On top of that, by the way, there's a new plan in place for post-war Gaza. So you just saw how you can't even call it infrastructure. It doesn't even make sense to call it that. But their housing is flooding because of the rainy season. And by housing, we mean makeshift tents that were never intended to actually house people. But as for hopes of any reconstruction happening anytime soon, here's the plan. U.S. military planning for divided Gaza with green zone secured by international and Israeli troops. Almost all Palestinians have been displaced to the red zone where no reconstruction is planned. The U.S. is planning for the long-term division of Gaza into a green zone under Israeli and international military control, where reconstruction would start, and a red zone to be left in ruins. Foreign forces will initially deploy alongside Israeli soldiers in the east of Gaza, leaving the devastated strip divided by the current Israeli-controlled yellow line, which you've heard about before, according to U.S. military planning documents seen by The Guardian and sources briefed on American plans. So there you have the map of the Gaza red zone, which is where, of course, the people are herded into now, living in those tent cities with the major population centers. And then outside that, you have the green zone, which is under Israeli control, with the divide being that yellow zone, that buffer zone. If this looks familiar to everybody, it's probably because you're thinking of maps like this, right? Where, there's Palestine, and then the white is Israel. And you notice how the map gets whiter and whiter and whiter. But you see, obviously, even the present-day map has that tiny little green strip on the westernmost side. That's Gaza. Well, now here they're taking some of Gaza. That's essentially what they're doing. This is under Israeli control. Temporarily, of course, until Gaza gets demilitarized. Right. Yeah, if you believe that, I have 4 maps I'd like to sell you. Okay. Ideally, you would want to make it all whole, right? But that's aspirational, said a U.S. official, speaking on condition of anonymity. It's going to take some time. It's not going to be easy. The U.S. military plans raise serious questions about Washington's commitment to turning the ceasefire announced last month into an enduring political settlement with Palestinian rule across Gaza, which was promised by Donald Trump. Plans for Gaza's future have been shifting at a dizzying rate, reflecting a chaotic, improvised approach to resolving one of the world's most complex and intractable conflicts, and providing aid, including food and shelter, to 2 million Palestinians. After weeks in which the U.S. promoted reconstruction in the form of fenced-in camps for small groups of Palestinians, referred to as alternative safe communities, where they have Kamala's team writing these plans, alternative safe communities. Those plans were dropped this week, the U.S. official said. Here, that's a snapshot of a concept that was put forth at a certain time, the U.S. official said. That might be Kamala Harris. Maybe that's the U.S. official. Maybe she got a job in the Trump administration. That sounds exactly. Tell me that's not something Kamala would say. That's a snapshot of a concept that was put forth at a certain time, the U.S. official said. They've already
Let me get
moved
a
on
Venn
from that.
diagram.
Yeah, right, exactly. They've already moved on from that. Humanitarian organizations who have repeatedly raised major concerns about the ASC model said on Friday they had yet to be notified of the change of plans. Without a workable plan for an international peacekeeping force, the withdrawal of Israeli troops, and large-scale rebuilding, Gaza risks slipping into limbo after 2 years of devastating war. Mediators have warned of a situation that is not war but not peace. In a divided Gaza with regular Israeli attacks and entrenched occupation, no Palestinian self-rule, and limited reconstruction of Palestinian homes and communities. Well, most of that paragraph just sounds like pre-October 7th Gaza. That's what it was.
Right.
It wasn't war, but it wasn't peace. There were regular Israeli attacks. Israel bombed Gaza 2 weeks before October 7th. An entrenched occupation, obviously. No Palestinian self-rule, obviously. And now the reconstruction is after the genocide. But Gaza has now shrunk. The Israelis are now occupying that green zone. Now, you ask, what kind of reconstruction is possible and how is life possible inside the red zone? So here you can see widespread destruction across the Gaza Strip has generated more than 61 million tons of debris. Not 61 million pounds of debris, 61 million tons. A ton is 2,000 pounds. So if you look at the map, obviously the most damaged area, Gaza City, that's in the red zone where no reconstruction will begin. Khan Yunis in the red zone where no reconstruction will begin. The area that is in the green zone now, probably because of the border with Egypt, is Rafah. And that is now under Israeli control. That's where their security forces are governing. So in other words, the areas where Israel is the occupying security force, where there is no Palestinian governing body to the extent that it matters where there is and where there isn't, because the whole fucking place is in ruins. The places that are going to be built up are the places outside of that red zone and in that green zone. The U.S. military planners also see reconstruction inside the green zone as part of a nebulous path to reuniting Gaza by convincing Palestinian civilians to move across the line of Israeli control. So they want to lure them out of the red zone, where there's only going to be tents and tons of debris, into the green zone, where Israel is the occupying force and where there's going to be built housing for them. You know what that sounds like? Concentration camps. Sounds like that to me. As things progress, you could create conditions for there to be significant progress on reconstruction. You will have Gazan civilians moving there, beginning to thrive. Oh, yeah, I'm sure they're going to thrive. I'm sure it's going to be amazing. The U.S. official said. People will say, hey, we want that. And so it evolves in that direction. No one's talking about a military operation to force it. Well, you know who just greenlit all of this? Our friends at the United Nations. That's right. The UN Security Council adopts resolution placing Gaza under control of U.S.-led board. Friend of the show, Dave DeCamp, writes this article here. The UN Security Council on Monday adopted a U.S. proposed resolution that places Gaza under the control of a U.S.-led body dubbed the Board of Peace for at least 2 years, and authorizes the development of an international force to the of an international force to the Palestinian territory that will operate under the watch of the United States military. The 15-member Security Council passed a resolution with 13 voting in favor and none voting against. Russia and China, sorry, some of you are not going to like this, abstained from voting, choosing not to use their veto power to stop the resolution. Ahead of the vote, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, warned that a vote against the resolution was a vote to return to war. The resolution endorses the 20-point U.S.-Israeli Gaza plan released by the White House on September 29th, which it refers to as the Comprehensive Plan. The resolution states that the Security Council welcomes the establishment of the Board of Peace, or BOP, which will be headed by who? President Trump. It describes the BOP as a transitional administration with international legal personality that will set the framework and coordinate funding for the redevelopment of Gaza pursuant to the Comprehensive Plan. The UN resolution says that the BOP will remain the authority in Gaza until the Palestinian Authority has satisfactorily completed its reform program, though Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has repeatedly rejected the idea of the PA having a role in Gaza, and whether the PA has reformed enough to take over in Gaza would likely be up to, of course, the United States and Israel. The resolution authorizes the BOP's control of Gaza until December 31st, 2027, and leaves open the possibility of the Security Council extending its mandate. Over the next 2 years, the BOP is tasked with overseeing a Palestinian technocratic apolitical committee of competent Palestinians from the Strip, which will be responsible for day-to-day operations of Gaza's civil service and administration. So here is Mike Waltz taking a victory lap on the floor of the United Nations.
Force will stabilize the security environment, support the demilitarization of Gaza, dismantle terrorist infrastructure, decommission weapons, and maintain the safety of Palestinian civilians. We believe that the investment that will follow adoption today will revitalize Gaza's economy, providing Palestinians with an opportunity instead of saddling them with perpetual reliance on aid.
The result of the voting is as follows.
Okay, we know the result of the voting, 13-0 with Russia and China abstaining. Donald Trump was very happy about this. Congratulations to the world and the incredible vote of the United Nations Security Council just moments ago, acknowledging and endorsing the Board of Peace, which will be chaired by me and include the most powerful and respected leaders throughout the world. This will go down as one of the biggest approvals in the history of the United Nations, will lead to further peace all over the world, and is a moment of true historic proportion. Thank you, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to read the rest of that. Mick Wallace, of course, Irish MP there to the EU. Pardon me. This vote for the U.S. resolution on Gaza is a disgrace. It's a vote for the Zionist settler colonial project to continue, a vote to continue denying Palestinians any right to self-determination, and a big disappointment that China and Russia refuse to oppose it. And Dave DeCamp, author of that article, summed it up. Pretty crazy that the UN Security Council just passed a resolution putting Trump in charge of Gaza. Yep, putting the foxes in charge of the hen house. And you know who went on a pretty epic rant about this? Our friend Blakely. Let's take a look.
Few years now, but let's ask again. What is the point of the UN? Why are you here? The UN voted today for Trump's peace plan, which is not a peace plan at all. This is just the latest phase in the occupation. And tell me why China and Russia abstained. Cowardly shit right there. But let's get to the bad guy of this. Us. So they're going to have a board of peace that's going to be overseen by Trump. I mean, if we're not going to take it seriously, you know, they haven't even stopped bombing Gaza, okay? They're still bombing Gaza. There isn't even a real ceasefire. A ceasefire would mean when you cease firing, which they're still doing. But even during this quote unquote ceasefire and this peace plan where they're still bombing the Palestinians and refusing to help them during devastating flooding that has been happening in the Gaza Strip, Palestinians being totally demilitarized and unarmed is a part of this quote unquote plan. So you're saying that Palestinians are not going to be allowed to have any sovereignty? Because if you're not allowed to have your own military, then you're not sovereign. Who would agree to that? Name me one other country that would agree to that. That's not a peace plan. That's a prisoner. Oh, and
of course. And Hamas, by the way, is saying they are not willing to abide by that. So this whole thing is very unlikely to actually hold.
They're allegedly going to have some foreign peacekeepers here. Who's that going to be? The Israeli regime right now are bombing peacekeepers in Lebanon. Who the fuck's going to want to do that job? This is a joke. This is a disgrace that anybody voted for this. And the U.S. shouldn't even be a part of this deal because we're clearly not a fair broker, okay? Putting aside the laughable proposition that Trump should oversee any kind of peace board, the idea that the U.S. is even a part of this is a joke. We have enabled and propped up this genocide at every single turn. We are not a neutral arbiter. So the idea that we're going to be the ones conducting this board as if we're going to be fair to the Palestinians is laughable. But thank you to the UN for leaving absolutely no doubt that you are fucking useless and there is no point in the UN existing because clearly none of you care about international law.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and ultimately, at the end of the day, this was yet another flex for the U.S. empire, which is not going down without a fight. For all this talk about multipolarity, this would have been a great opportunity for Russia and China to flex that muscle. They didn't. They didn't,
Not
and
very based.
not very based. I do have to say though, according to the article, when you read what Mike Waltz said, a vote against this would have been a return to war. Ultimately, what this is the United States and Israel saying, look, we could do whatever we want, whether you like it or not. So let us set up this cockamamie scheme where we could do what we always do, which is agree to peace and then blame it on the Palestinians when it all falls apart. Or I guess we'll just keep going. I guess we'll just keep bombing. And bombs or no bombs, we just showed you as all this is happening, Gaza is flooding. Of course, there's going to be, rampant disease and death and just people getting horribly sick from living essentially underwater now, as so many of them are. They're trying to kill them. They are trying to kill the Palestinians. The genocide has not stopped. It's just they're not bombing as much as they were before. Their intentions remain exactly the same. And at the end of the day, UN or no UN, resolution or no resolution, this is the empire asserting in its last years that might makes right. And while we still have might, we dictate to you what is right and wrong. International law be damned. We don't give a fuck. That's the message that we sent. And of course, Russia and China, you say they should have vetoed it. I believe they should have vetoed it, obviously, but vetoing it risked another outburst of violence, because that is ultimately what these two thug states, the United States and Israel, are holding over, not just Gaza, but the entire world, as we're seeing in lash out after lash out. Now Venezuela is next on the list. What are you going to do about it? No, they were terrorists on that boat. Oh, we didn't prove it. Well, what are you going to do about it? That's at the end of the day, like, this is such a mask off moment for the West. It just shows that none of what values we claim to hold dear are actual values. The West has no values. Their one value is might makes right. And while we still have more weapons than you do, we are going to exploit that to punish you as much as possible. Period.
Yeah, and that has always been the case. We in the 20th and 21st century, particularly post World War II, because might makes right as a basic assumption of statecraft has gone out of fashion. They had to propagandize their populations, particularly because of the West's somewhat unique romance with its own ideology and its need to promote that as the greatest ideology, and fairness and equality and human rights. Because of its fetishization of those ideas, it really needed to promote the idea among its population that that's what it actually stands for, that that's what it actually does around the world. And the way that they have massaged that into the brains of the liberal class is with magazines like The Atlantic. Whenever the United States does something objectively horrible, they'll always frame it as an unfortunate case of trying to negotiate the realities of a hostile world. And it's always, we didn't mean to do it, but Putin, and that's how they get them to go along with it. What we've really seen, particularly in the genocidal project of the Israeli state and the way it's been really exposed for what it is over the last couple of years, it's just that basic, even the core premise that we don't commit the kinds of atrocities that those people do. Even that's not true. I'm gonna say something you'll probably never hear me say on the show again. Daryl Cooper was right about something, and we actually made that point at the time. If you want to make the argument that Churchill and the West, in many ways, were not very much different from the fascists whose ideology they claim to oppose. Well, welcome to the left, buddy. Welcome to, like, that's an argument the left has been making forever. The problem with the argument was he was implicitly making the argument that Hitler was better, actually, than what he was opposing.
Right.
That's where, and I mean, didn't bring up the genocidal famine in India that was overseen by Churchill during that period. Like, you really want to make that argument, that's where you want to go. But that's not a good way to make the kind of argument that really he's trying to make, to expose that element of the West's foulness, because that would work against the basic Western supremacism that underlies his argument and that most of his followers are attracted to. But yeah, man, what if we had films of what that looked like, the famine in India that was overseen by Churchill, alongside the images of people coming out of the concentration camps? Would it really look better than that looks?
Right.
But we don't see those images. We don't see that part of Western history. Who the hell really sits down and reads Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee? Who really sits down and reads that? And that's 19th century. That will tend to feel like, well, we can disown that because we've moved past it. Have we? Have we? Is there any atrocity that's been committed against a group of people that's really greater than what's happening to the Palestinians? And I'm not saying they're the only ones. We've tried to cover Sudan.
Sure.
There are horrible things happening there right now with public executions and massacres and starvation. They're not the only ones. But at least ostensibly, we're not directly backing and supporting that. By all accounts, that's a UAE affair. And I'm not saying it's not a big club where we don't have some kind of tangential involvement, but this is overt. We're literally taking ownership of this as a country, which gives Americans a special responsibility to speak out against it. And all the more so, Jewish Americans really need to use, or Jews anywhere in the world, really need to use the ability you have to throw back the anti-Semitism accusations that nobody else has.
Right. And that's why we're covering Dave Portnoy later.
Yeah.
I'll tease that out.
Please clap.